Good evening, everyone. So this is the Google Summer of Code information session. My name is Harshith Mohan Kumar, and I've created a deck of slides here, a neat little presentation with the help of my brother, who helped me visually organize Pramithesh's blog post. And if you already haven't checked out his blog post, I highly recommend that you do. It's very in detail, and it goes over what I'm going to be explaining in this presentation. So breaking things up into contents, we're going to start with a quick little introduction. People might already know what Google Summer of Code is, and a lot of people might not know what GSoC is. And we'll cover why even contribute to GSoC, why even participate, what the prerequisites are, and whatnot. And then we'll go over 5 different steps of figuring out how to get into GSoC, starting with getting started, finding an organization, getting involved with the community, selecting a project, and working on a proposal. We'll finish off with a few little bonus tips, and finally, I'll give you a glimpse of what I did at Red Hen Lab last summer, Google Summer of Code 2022. So throughout this presentation, in addition to Pramithesh's blog post, the content extracted from his blog post, I'm going to try to give my perspective on what exactly happened last summer. Right. So just to quickly introduce myself, my name is Harshith, as I said before. I'm currently an undergraduate intern at Intel. Prior to that, during the summer of 2022, last year, I worked for Red Hen Lab under the Google Summer of Code program on a large-scale project for a period of 4 months. My mentor was Frankie Robertson, as well as 2 other UCLA professors. Prior to that year, I was a student researcher at the Indian Institute of Science. So I participated in their summer research program. I think it's called SRFP, Summer Research Fellowship Program. Yeah, that's what it's called. It's also pretty popular. Great experience. I didn't really work on ML, but sort of on computer networking and whatnot. Yeah, and so if you do want to learn more about me, you can visit my website at harshithmohankumar.com or check out my LinkedIn, GitHub, or Medium for any of my projects. So let's get started. What exactly is GSoC? So GSoC is really popular amongst the Indian communities, particularly. And that's because it's very reputable by a lot of people, and it's highly competitive to get into. So in short term, Google Summer of Code is basically this worldwide program which offers undergraduate and graduate students to work on open source projects. And open source is basically code that is freely available for anyone to use on the internet. It is not owned by any independent organization. And a lot of software that you might know, like Linux, Ubuntu, all of these software are open source. TensorFlow, if you're an ML engineer, Airflow, like there's a bunch of tools that you use as a programmer that are developed by individuals who are coding it for free out of pure love. So what GSoC tries to do is encourage participation early on into a student's or undergraduate's career. Try to get them involved in what exactly software development is and how to build these large-scale tools that everyone else is using for the development of programming and code in general. And in addition, you get to work with these like amazing organizations like, TensorFlow or Red Hen Lab, the one that I worked with, and get to meet a lot of experienced mentors and work on great projects. So right, sort of what I talked about, but something that I might not have covered was stipend, of course. That's something that everyone tries to look at first. And I know that at least a lot of people think they want to contribute to GSoC because of the fact that you get a really big payday, but you have to look at it in terms of sort of like what your interests are and what you want to get out of it, right? And I think Google Summer of Code highly appreciates people who want to build software for the world, and they try to reward them incredibly high for doing that. So the stipend for Google Summer of Code as a student in India, or anyone living in India, is $1,500 for a medium to small size project, and 3,000 US dollars for a large scale project. And so the small scale project is around 175 hours in total, whereas the large scale project is anywhere between 350 hours and more. So in addition to the stipend, you get to gain a lot of experience, especially in what your organization is focusing on. And to give you an example, for Red Hen Lab, I worked on a multimodal segmentation pipeline, which uses a lot of machine learning. So I come from a background of ML. I do a lot of research in ML, particularly with computer vision and a little bit of NLP. But what I didn't realize is the fact that, when you try to apply state-of-the-art machine learning models into the real world, you run into a lot of complexity issues. And so throughout my project, I was trying to debug how to parallelize my code, how to train with multiple GPUs on multiple clusters, and how to take about 200 terabytes of data and filter them down to something that can be processed by an ML algorithm. So in itself, squished into a 4-month period, is something that students never get to work on in their university. So yeah, next is reputation. I mean, Google Summer Code is very well known, and if you get to put GSoC into your resume, that gives you a great highlight, especially with recruiters. You get to make a lot of meaningful contributions that other people will utilize. It's open source. Anyone can look at your work and move forward with what you've done. And you get to build community networking. I mean, for Red Hen Lab at least. So I worked with 2 UCLA professors, as I might have mentioned before, and that helped a lot with graduate school because I ended up asking them for a letter of recommendation, and they were quite willing to give me a letter of recommendation due to what I've done. So definitely something that will help you out in your career and later down the line. And don't just try to look at it in terms of, okay, you're going to get a big payday. That's what I'm trying to look for. But, when people look at GSoC, they don't look at it as a job or a particular internship. They look at it as an opportunity for growth and development. And that's what it was for me. Okay, prerequisites. So there's a lot of questions here. What programming languages do I need to know? How many do I need to know? Well, generally, you might want to know like Python, C, C++, or any of the dev programming languages like HTML, CSS, JavaScript, etc. But it's highly dependent on your organization and what you want to do. Whoops. Okay, so for example, Red Hen Lab primarily focuses on multimodal machine learning type projects. And if you take a look at their website and go through their previous projects, you can see that they heavily focus on Python, Linux distribution type programming like Unix, HPC. You must know Bash really well. And you don't have to be an expert in any of these languages. You can always learn throughout the process. And that's the great part, right? You just have to showcase that you're able to take on this project and finish it by the end of your deadline. So next up is, hopefully that answered the question about programming languages. Um, and another example that I might give is TensorFlow, for example. So TensorFlow is a machine learning framework that's developed by Google. So it's built with C++. The core functionality is built with C++, and the top layer, which we use, the API, is built with Python. So depending on what layer you want to work on, you might want to know Python or C++ more. Usually the projects that TensorFlow takes on for Google Summer of Code heavily focuses on Python. So if you go through their code base, you must know how to figure out, you must figure out how to, add in particular methods, what their doc styles are, what their formatting styles are, how they define constants. Everything is very particular because in university, you pick up these programming languages, Python course, and you write quick scripts, maybe 100 lines of code, and you never document, you never format it, you never pay attention to what you're actually writing, right? But when you make programs or code for the entire world to use, you gotta keep in mind that thousands and thousands of people are gonna look at your code and utilize it. So it has to be very particular. So in that sense, you want to perfect your skills in a certain programming language in terms of how to build code that can last a very long time. They're not going to ask you like DSA questions. They're not going to ask you how to reverse a linked list. That's pretty much what they ask. Okay, moving on from programming. Yeah, you have to be really good and independent, like really good at thinking independently. For my Red Hen Lab proposal, I spent around 2 to 3 months coming up with my own unique idea or solution to one of their projects that was ongoing. And so the unique twist that I proposed was, well, first of all, starting with the problem statement, there are 300,000 plus 8-hour videos which were recently digitized. So starting from, these videos are very old. They start from the 1900s and go up to the 2000s. And so what they were missing was the metadata. When do each shows start? When do they end? What was the show name? What network was it broadcasted on? All of this data was missing because of the fact that, in 1900s, they just used to play these videos on the TV, and there were VHS tapes. I'm not sure you guys know what VHS tapes are. This is bulky tape clip, and there were recorders for VHS to record onto this tape, and those tapes were digitized. And so my problem was to, how do we go through these recently digitized videos and figure out the timestamp for start, stop for each show across an 8-hour file. And what I proposed was, okay, well, clearly when a show transitions, there's going to be a black screen. There's also going to be a title sequence. Each show, like let's say the Ellen DeGeneres show, has a theme song. She has her own particular theme, and she also has a title card for her show. What we could do is first filter based on audio. We can say that if music is playing, it's most likely some sort of, there's a presence of title sequence there. It might be the theme song that's playing. So quickly we can filter through all of these 8-hour segments using, ideas like that. And to figure out these ideas, you have to spend a lot of time digging through these projects, digging through the source code, digging through past people, what they've done, what wasn't explored. And that's half of it. If you're able to think independently, come up with unique solutions, and put them down on paper and show it to your mentor, you're pretty much there. Like, if I were to be a mentor for Google Summer of Code, I would definitely pick someone who has spent a lot of time going through the projects, without coming to me first and asking me what I can do, right? Um, yeah, so this goes back with programming. What should you be familiar with? I mean, Linux is pretty much what most people use for development, but you don't have to be a pro in any of one of these. As I said, each organization has their own guidelines to what they use, and there's a lot of flexibility there. Credibility, yes, this is also pretty important. In addition to being an independent thinker, you want to maintain a good public appearance. So build up your profile like GitHub, LinkedIn, your resumes, and portfolio sites. For Red Hen Lab, they absolutely require you to put out weekly blog posts about what you did. And if you go to my Medium account, you can see 12 different blog posts from week 0 to week 12, or week 1 to week 12 of what I've done. And already having a very consistent blog post or website or an active presence shows to your mentor that you're really serious about what you can accomplish. Okay, so we talked about what you need, but how do you build these skills? And let's go through the 5 different steps, right? Starting with getting started. So if I haven't stressed enough already, you definitely have to go through blogs and contribute guidelines. Especially start with, if you don't know what you're interested in, start with going through what Google Summer of Code is, right? You can go to their website and read about what the organization is. Figure out what the eligibility criteria is. They have very, very detailed list of points on who is eligible. So recently, I think a year ago, they started introducing graduate students as well into the pool with undergraduate students. It definitely makes the program a lot more competitive to get in, mostly because, as an undergraduate student, not only do you not know what you want to do, but you also lack a lot of experience and skills that a graduate student might have. But at the same time, it's this challenge that makes it more rewarding. Now, if you get into Google Summer of Code, you can pretty much brag to yourself that not only are you highly focused, but you also get to spend a lot of time with these mentors who are pretty much like mentoring people who are in their graduate studies, right? So it's almost like a free PhD if you think about it like that. So yeah, and another thing to keep in mind is the timeline, and this is very, very, very important. Google Summer of Code, they publish particular dates for what they're doing. And so if you go ahead and search up Google Summer of Code 2023 timeline, there's going to be a website with a bunch of different months and what each date, what the deadline is for each date. It usually starts with organization filtering, and then then they choose their mentors, then they choose the list of projects and people, the coding, like the what is it called, contribution period or something starts. Totally forgot what it's called, but an application period starts and it closes around April. That's usually when mentors are highly active with they will read your proposal, they will give you advice. Until the end of April, you can try to perfect your proposal. And to build your proposal, definitely read the blogs and guides by your organization and people who have already participated in that organization. So in my experience for Red Hen Lab, like I said, I spent around 2 months figuring out this project and diving deep into one particular solution. So the project I worked on, multimodal TV show segmentation, was an ongoing project for the past 4 years. And so there had been 4 different contributors in the past, and I went through each one's code base, what they had contributed that summer, made a list of what they accomplished, made a list of what they didn't accomplish, and tried to put all of the pieces together to see, what we do now and how can we take the project further. So essential resources, this was provided by Pramitesh's blog post, and you can go check it out. So he has a few blogs that are linked in his article. So that completes step 1 of getting started. Step 2 is finding an organization. This is one of the most, I guess I would say this is one of the hardest part of Google Summer of Code. Right, so okay, so if you want to take a look at what organizations are available, what you could do is go ahead and go to Google Summer of Code's organization list. And this is for the past year. And you can usually figure out a trend, right? Whatever organizations signed up last year usually sign up for the next year. For example, Jenkins, these guys have been in the game for several years now, and they're a huge open source community. So it is 100% likely that they're going to come back this year. The 2023 list has not been published yet, as far as I know. And if you really want to double check, as you can see, you can click on Google Summer of Code 2023 timeline, and boom, we have this neat little list with every day and what is going to go on in that day. And so today, or I guess tomorrow, this is all UTC. Mentoring organizations can start submitting applications to Google. And then around February, the organization deadlines appear. And February 2022 is when the organizations are published for 2023. Right? So you want to put these dates into your Google Calendar so you know what exactly is going on as you're going through these different organizations. So you can filter, so we were talking about exploring these different organizations. And what you could do is, let's say there are, maybe 500 or 200 organizations available. You want to first pick out what your interests are, because you don't want to pick based on the organization. You want to figure out in 5 years what you want to be doing. Well, for me, it was I want to be an ML engineer. Okay, great. So let's try looking for machine learning. All right, there's TensorFlow and all of these other organizations, Red Hen Labs here. And what I can do now is briefly go through a bunch of these and figure out what interests me the most. So filter down that way. Start with your interests, filter down to 10 organizations, and on those 10 organizations, quickly cross out 5. And in these 5 organizations that are left, look through their past projects. Okay, did you find anything good? Great. Filter down to 3, and then go forward into the code base. For example, if Red Hen Lab, TensorFlow, and Julia were in my top 3, now I would go to TensorFlow's GitHub repository or their organization, their website. Look at what they're doing. And finally, you should have around 2 organizations. So you can send up to 3 proposals, I believe. But ideally, you only want to send 1 proposal and spend all of your time on 1 organization. For me, last year, that was Red Hen Lab. I wanted to contribute to TensorFlow as well, but I knew that if I put all of my time into Red Hen Lab and making that proposal the best that it could be, I would get a higher chance of getting in. Okay, let's go back to full screen here. Okay, right. So when you're exploring your organization, you want to do 5 different things. Well, first is to contribute. And this can be in different ways for different organizations. For TensorFlow, they have a huge repository on GitHub where you can go through their bugs and issues. They usually label like certain issues as good first issue that you can check out. Other organizations like Red Hen Lab, they don't have a central GitHub repository. You just have to go through the previous projects, and they're all hosted on personal accounts. Next, check out their website if they have one. Most likely, they'll definitely have a website. They'll also have certain communication channels like Slack groups, Google groups, anywhere that they communicate on. And then finally, you wanna check in with the people who have contributed before, maybe like myself. It's great that you're in this meeting right now, and you guys can figure out what exactly happened with me and Red Hen Lab. Okay, getting involved with the community. Okay, this is sort of general in the sense that not all communities have chats and groups where you can introduce yourself. But I do know definitely that TensorFlow does. And the first year that I applied, I think the year before I got into Red Hen Lab, I had applied to Google Summer of Code 2021 for TensorFlow, and I was rejected. So, but during that process, what I learned was, okay, I can go into TensorFlow. They had Slack channels, and on Slack, there would be 10 to 15 people, or maybe 5 to 10 people who are highly active. And there are also the people who go through GitHub pull requests and whatnot. In addition, TensorFlow also has bi-weekly or weekly meetings, especially the add-ons groups. So if you're in TensorFlow add-ons or TFX add-ons, they have bi-weekly meetings where you can hop in and directly interact with these developers or mentors. Right. Okay, if you're early, like I said, you got to go through their timeline. Certain projects will not be listed, but you could look at previous projects and try to estimate what would be next. Yeah, don't be afraid to ask questions. I mean, even before I started recording this presentation, there were a few people on MS Teams, around 15 people, and tried to ask them if you have any questions. This might be your chance. And if you are a pretty quiet person, you're definitely not going to make it in Google Summer of Code, mostly because of the number of people who apply. If someone is a lot more active and is actively communicating to their mentor, asking questions, it's more likely that they get into the spotlight than you, right? So yeah, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to fail. I didn't get into Google Summer of Code in the first year. It took me 1 year after rejection, and that was actually a great learning experience. I figured out, what I have to do for the next year. And consistency is definitely key. I mean, especially with TensorFlow, you have to have a lot of have a lot of merges into their repository before you can get into the highlight of a mentor. So you have figured out an organization. How do you choose a project within that organization? The quickest way to do this is honestly go through the past projects. And this is listed on Google Summer of Code's website. You can see every single project that has been completed in the previous years. These organizations tend to follow a similar trend in what projects they take on. For Red Hen Lab, like I said, the multimodal TV show segmentation was a 5-year ongoing project, right, with 4 different people. And so it was quite evident that, this problem wasn't solved, but would it still had the potential for some feature to be added. And try to pick projects that interest you, and that's the key here. Don't just pick projects because they're popular. If you want to work on it for 4 months, you really need to pick something that calls out to you. And yeah, going back to skills, some of these projects will definitely be incredibly difficult. Like if you go through the past TensorFlow projects or Red Hen Labs projects, they have a bunch of terminology that you won't understand at all. And that was the case when I was going when I was doing the research, right? There was terms like HPC, parallelization, connecting to servers, SSH, all of these things that I had no clue about. All I knew was, okay, I know how to take rules from TensorFlow, I know how to fine tune ML models. But don't worry, you can pick up these skills in a matter of months. And that's what mentors want to see. They want to see people who can, adapt really quickly, pick up things on their own, and learn. And if you can showcase that in a proposal, it will definitely help you stand out. So, yeah, I mean, when you are going through a project, you might want to keep these like 5 different things in mind. Like, what exactly is the problem? What skills does that project require? What could the solution possibly be? I mean, in my case, remember, I found out a unique case where I could take the audio segments and figure out where music was to identify the transition in each show, right? So think these things out and then communicate these notes with your mentor to show them that you're actively looking into certain projects. And right, so finally the proposal. I want to skip over this slide here. Yeah. So when you're building up a proposal, each organization has different templates and what they want in that proposal. You might want to go look at that first, but it usually starts with, okay, what exactly has happened before? So you want to talk about past projects, and then you want to talk about the problem statement that you want to work on. And the solution for that problem statement should be quite detailed. So my Red Hen Lab proposal was approximately 6 to 9 pages long. And it follows, it was kind of like a research paper. And they have a template online on Overleaf. So I followed that template, filled in the information, got a bunch of help from my mentor, and sort of built it that way. A detailed timeline is definitely required. You want to showcase what you're going to be doing within each week to show that you can actually accomplish your solution. And yeah, just communicate your end goals. What are your specific outcomes? And so this is very, very crucial because let's say you do get into Google Summer of Code and you've built this proposal. They're going to use that proposal as a grading rubric for how you do during the next 4 or 3 months. So having very specific goals, let's say my goals were, okay, I want to get X amount of metadata within the first 5 weeks, right? Did I meet that goal by the midway progress was something that was checked during their evaluation. So yeah, this looks like a lot of work, and I'm not gonna say it's not. It definitely is, and that's why a lot of people don't get into Google Summer of Code. It's because putting in this initial amount of work to create this entire document in itself is just a huge, huge commitment. So if you do end up putting a lot of time, you communicate with your mentor, make a wonderful proposal, you will have a great chance of getting in. And yep, this slide I kind of want to skip over again. Yep. So yeah, templates, of course, each organization has their own templates. You might want to look at previous proposals to figure out how to organize yours. Building a relationship with your mentor is very, very crucial. They will help you with your proposal if you communicate to them, if you are actively engaging in their community chats, they will notice you. Including diagrams is pretty cool too. In my proposal, I had a few diagrams of architectures, so ML models such as the one that I used for feature extraction. I included an architectural diagram within my proposal. And also like flowcharts, okay? So what I built was a pipeline. I had to show that what was the input and output for each component that I was going to build. And this pretty much showcases like that how to build software, and when you do start building it, you can use that as like an outline for your code. And feedback from your mentors, of course. Okay. And start early. November onwards would be great, especially for huge organizations where there's a lot of people and a lot of issues. But when I started contributing last year, it was actually the start of January, which it might seem late to some people, but it definitely, I mean, you can start now and have a high chance of getting in. It just depends on how you put yourself out. I've covered a lot of things in this presentation. Are you able to do those things is what matters. And of course, passion. Community aspect is you gotta get into their group, start contributing, be social, ask questions, make a presence. And then finally, passion. Mentors can clearly identify who the individuals who are passionate and those who are not. So if you're doing this just for the stipend or the recognition, it's going to be evident to your mentor or the people who are selecting that, what you're trying to do this for. And generally, the people who are passionate about Google Summer of Code are the ones that tend to be picked. Okay, so I'm not done yet, but if you have any questions, I'll go through the chat right now. In the meantime, this is my email and this is my website where you can check things out. Okay, so I'm going to read through a few questions here. I'm learning coding since 15 days. Can I participate in GSoC 23? That's tough, man. I mean, to put the statistics into perspective, I think around so it's actually on Google. If you can actually search up their statistics, I think around 5,000 people applied and only 1,500 people got in globally, or something like that. You might want to check. It's just incredibly competitive, and I would say that your chances will be very low. Okay, so Tushar says, I believe you had no idea about the problem statements till they were announced. Is it? So more or less everybody gets an equal shot at the application? Definitely not. People do not get an equal shot at their application. So people who start early, people who go through the past projects, have done a lot of research, will definitely have a higher chance of getting in. People who are actively communicating with their mentors, communicating in the groups, will be highlighted. And essentially, the people who are picking people who get to participate in GSoC are the mentors that you're communicating to. So in each organization, let's say there are about 5-6 mentors, they're the ones who choose the proposal that gets accepted, right? So yeah, even though you might not know what the exact projects that are going to be released, you can still do a lot of research before these projects even, problem statements even come out. And that's how you get an edge. So in my scenario, I've tried contributing for a month to a project that I thought I would enjoy and could work with. Learned it the hard way. It wasn't for me or on my level. Read his blog, which said I require some development, dev experience. Do I put in a huge time now, or do I learn at my own pace with a new project? Okay, so for this question, it's never too late to learn. Um, you know, I didn't get to Google Summer Code the first time, as I said over and over again, but it was such a huge learning experience. Getting rejected gave me the tools and just experience that I needed to get into the second year. So when I did start the second year, I was on my feet running. I was looking at constantly paying attention to the timeline. I was getting in early, going through the projects. Um, yeah, even though I mean, you don't have to be incredibly technically experienced. You just have to put in a lot of time um, to go through what has been done and what you can do, and show to your mentors that you're someone who's willing to do this. Okay, so I do have another presentation that I want to show, and this has to do with what I did at Red Hen Lab. Let's see. It's in a PDF format. So I guess I will show it like this. Okay. So this was my midway progress for Google Summer of Code for Red Hen Lab, right? And as I might have mentioned before, my mentor was Frankie Robertson, along with Tim and Francis, who are UCLA professors. Right. So a quick introduction into what I was doing. So I was taking videos that were recently digitized by the UCLA Library Broadcast Newscape group and figuring out video cuts and split metadata for that collection. And so that collection is called the Rosenthal collection. So knowing all of these things, right, doing research about what exactly Newscape is, what they've done before, what exactly Rosenthal collection is, who is Rosenthal, all of this were things that I was doing in January and February. It was definitely hard. Like I had no idea like all of this existed, but doing that research helped me build a great proposal. So I proposed a two-stage pipeline, which collects, which segments video TV shows based on their title sequence. So my two stages revolve around title sequence detection. The first stage is sort of like a filtering stage. It started with audio segmentation. I took these 8-hour clips. I only took the audio bits, and then ran it through a deep learning model to classify it into music, noise, and speech. 1 second, I'm gonna grab some water. Okay, so next, after we filter out, after we classify it into these three different categories, what I did was I filtered out noise and speech. That's not something what I want to look at, and try to get in the music segments. And what I did then was annotate the keyframes and train the image classifier. So the reason why I did this was music can be played not only in title sequences. And title sequence, if you don't know what it is, it's just that introduction theme song that I played before every show. But when can music also be played? Well, it can be played during the show if a band or a concert or a commercial is playing. And and what I did was, well, I used images to classify if it was a commercial, if it was actually an introduction theme song for a particular show. And that way I was able to filter out false positives through image classification. Just to rewind, I started with audio classification. I moved into image classification. And my stage 2, or the final stage, was clustering. So this here was a pre-trained model. This here was a fine-tuned model through annotations that I made. And the final stage here is unsupervised. Clustering is unsupervised. You don't need training data for it. And that way I was able to extract all of these features and cluster them to figure out similar shows and group them together. Okay, so yeah, roadmap. I mean, HPC, like what is HPC, high performance computing, getting set up with Singularity, all of these things were things that I had no idea how to do before GSoC started. And thankfully for Frankie, I quickly just grasped it within like a week, and got my job set up and got around to coding. Moved on to music segmentation, keyframe annotation, and then image filtering. Yep. So some of the challenges that I faced was, I had no idea what HPC was, figuring out what Singularity is. Singularity is basically like Docker, but it's a very particular type of Docker. Learning how to SSH. I mean, so Case Western Reserve, they have HPC servers that sit in the United States, and I'm in India. So I had to figure out, okay, how do I connect to their servers, and how do I run my jobs on their GPUs? Optimization was a huge thing as well. My data set was around 200 terabytes and had to figure out how to use multi-threading and incorporate wrappers to make my code a lot faster. I want to skip what array jobs are. I mean, they're a very particular type of scheduling jobs which make it very efficient to run your code. So this is just a summary of what I did for the first 5 weeks. In fact, you can go to my Medium to know what I did every single week, because every week I've posted a blog post about what I've done. So it's all here. And I'm pretty sure, like for Red Hen Lab at least, every single Red Hen Lab contributor would have maintained a weekly blog post on what they have done. So if you want to contribute to Red Hen Lab, just go ahead and check out certain projects and check out the people who contributed to that project and go through their blogs. Okay, so these are things that are going to be hard to understand because you don't know the details of the project. But basically, these are just cool little visual charts of the different years that the videos were segmented in. Here's a cool little output of what I extracted. And these were the features of just, one particular month of a year. See, it's 2006 and January. And there are thousands and thousands of files. So what I was talking about was, this title sequence detection. You can see here the title sequence for Dr. Phil. And this is definitely a commercial here. And this is sort of like random noise, right? And these were my results for the image classifier. I got around 85 to 87% test accuracy, which was quite good for a real-world application use. So yeah, I went from music start and stop timeframes to filtered, based on what they are. Is it commercial? Is it a title sequence? And even their probability of what the classification was. So these are all metadata files that have actually been stored on the Case Western Reserve University's HPC. And let's say if someone wants to contribute to this project once again, this is sort of the work that they will be picking up again. So let's say you've reached out to Frankie. I mean, Frankie would have definitely known what happened in this project, but you should have also went through this project and figured out what I've done, what I've outputted, and what my deficiencies were, so you can communicate what you can propose. And if you can show that to Frankie, he'll definitely take in your proposal. He'll give a lot of thought into it and give you advice on what you can do. And yep, it's just an output of all of the title sequences and commercials that I've extracted. And so the next phase, of course, this was the midway progress. The next phase was unsupervised learning, clustering. And to be frank, the clustering part did not work as well as we thought it would. And you can look into my GitHub repository, particularly for why it didn't. And this could be an area where you could pick it up and improve on. Maybe you have something in mind that could fix this end solution. And so yeah, this was a project that a presentation that I created for my mentors. So that pretty much wraps things up. Just know that there are a few more questions here. Maybe I could answer a couple more. I'm a first-year university student interested in GSoC, strict minimum attendance. What? How much time? Oh, okay. Well, I can't say, okay, let's say someone else is willing to put in 200 hours. Are you willing to put in 200 hours to, work this other person? It totally depends on how much you want it. To me, I wanted it more than the grades that I was getting at university. And my CGPA isn't too high, but contributing to GSoC was a life-changing experience for me. Can you share your proposal? It will be helpful. Okay, so if you want to know the template for Red Hen Lab, you can directly go to Red Hen Lab's webpage, and they have their template in their LaTeX template right here. You can click on it. And I think my proposal has been linked in one of my blog posts. So I'm just going to leave it at that. If you are willing to go through my blog posts, then you get the chance to read my proposal. I couldn't find a mailing list for Red Hen Lab. Yeah, so Red Hen Lab does not have communication channels. You kind of just have to stay in the dark. I'll do a lot of research initially, and then contact a mentor when you're ready to propose something. Same problem. Should we start interacting in communities after organization list is released, or should we start beforehand? So people start, 1 year in ahead. Let's say someone didn't get in last year, that person will be in contact with the mentor. So there's no particular start date for Google Summer of Code. It's whoever comes earliest and whoever puts in the most amount of time and comes up with a unique solution are the people who are going to be preferred. It's not contributing to some issues. Can they revoke their application? Yes, in fact, they can. They can revoke the application during the midway period or the end. So they do have evaluations in GSoC. Did you have the opportunity to contribute to Red Hen Lab community or converse with any of them before you could turn in your application? Yes, I did get in contact with one of my mentors, um, and so we hopped on call, we discussed the proposal, and that way it gave me a lot of information, and also it helped me shape my proposal to what it was. But again, it's not like I just emailed my mentor saying, hey, I want to do this, or hey, I'm interested, what can I do? That will definitely not give you a response. You have to put in the work in going through the past project and figuring out, what could possibly be done. Um, so that gives you a lot of highlight there. How do I get in touch with mentors? Depends on the organization. Some of them are on Slack. You can get on contact with them. Some of them will list their emails on the websites. You can email them. Yeah. Do your mentors help and teach you some of the important things that you would need for the projects? Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, definitely. That's what they're for. They're mentors for a reason. And not only that, I mean, my mentors taught me things that were way beyond just GSoC in itself. Um, just like Frankie is currently doing his PhD, and he was telling, and I want to do my master's, and I wanted to go to graduate school, and he really helped me out in deciding what I want to do in the future, and what my career would sort of look like if I do a PhD. So yeah, mentors definitely do help a lot. Tips in understanding the code base. Yeah, TensorFlow is very overwhelming. So one thing that I recommend for huge open source tools like TensorFlow is one, utilize the tool from a client perspective. Utilize TensorFlow's models. You go through their tutorials, know what TensorFlow does, and then try to look at how to create custom methods. So in TensorFlow, there's the easy way and there's the hard way. The easy way is just, you use their predefined methods. There's another custom component where you can go in and build out the model from the ground, right? So slowly start digging yourself into the lower layers of the code. And once you do that, you'll soon be able to understand a majority of the code base. Is GSoC a ticket to a job at Google? Please, in fact, 12,000 people got laid off from Google. It came out like 3 days ago. So yeah, it's Google's a tough place to be right now. Can you share a link to your blog with your actual proposal? Thanks again. In fact, you know what? I'll try to take a look at it. It must be in one of. Okay. Give me a second. I'm just going to open up my proposal because I think that actually might be very useful to people. Okay. So, yep, this is what my proposal looked like. Oh wow, it was 13 pages. It's not mine, 9 pages, it was 13. Okay. Okay, so I started off with the summary of what my proposal is, like an abstract, did a bit of a background, what my project was. It dates back to 2018, right? So it's a pretty long ongoing project. Talked about the data set. And for this, I had to do a lot of research, not just going through the past projects, but looking up what Newscape is on Google, and watching like documentation and other videos on what Newscape is. Right. So this, going on about the data set and the different types of data that has been collected, and the four different, people. So it's Nitesh contributed twice in 2020 and 2021. That does end up happening. You can contribute multiple times to Google Summer of Code. I don't think there's any limitation on how many times you can come back. Made a small little review of each year, identified my goals and objectives. So this is something that, I went through with my mentor to identify. And in this list, I identify, the different phases and also the different stages of my pipeline. Then I go into the methods, so describing the exact implementation of these different stages and phases, right? Starting with, what the workflow is, my entire pipeline, from start to end. What is the data gonna go through? What are the different components that are involved in my pipeline? And also like what the metadata would look like. So what are the features that I'm extracting, and how I'm going to save it. And I also looked into certain methods for extracting audio classification even before diving into the project. I did a little bit of implementation and a proof of concept. And yeah, you can take a look at this, right? I've done a lot of research and a lot of write-up on this project, and I can talk about this project for days, but it's sort of the work that is sort of expected from you if you want to contribute to GSoC. You have to put in a lot of work initially to get selected. Okay. Yep. I pretty sure this is available online. There's a public link. If not, if you're very interested in the work that I've done, you can always reach out to me on LinkedIn and I can share my proposal with you. Well, that pretty much concludes it. Thanks everyone for joining. I hope this session was informative.